it's been 20 years almost. I still, they're less and less, but I still have stress streams where I'm working in the office, but I'm like not supposed to be there, but I still need to work. So I'm like hiding under my desk, typing on my computer above me so Tony won't see me when he walks by and be like, "What are you doing here?"
Welcome, everyone, to This Was The Scene, the podcast that takes a look back at the late 90s, early 2000 punk scene. I'm your host, Mike Doyle. Before we start, my YouTube channel is now monetized, so if you want to go watch some videos there, then I think that helps, I guess, or you just put it on the background and just not pay attention to it, maybe. There's also a little thanks button on the bottom right of each video, so if you ever want to leave a little tip, you know, if you don't want to do the $1 a month on my Patreon, patreon.com/thiswasthescene, then you can do like maybe $1 or $2 here or there. And that's all that you would need to do to help this out. But that's your call, and I appreciate all of you. Victory's come up a lot through the 6.5 years of this podcast, and I think it's pretty safe to say that Tony Brummel's not going to probably give his time to come on here and chat about it. So because of that, I had reached out to Monika Ebly, who has been following the podcast, and asked her if she wanted to come on, which she did, and talk about her days at Victory. That was episode 206 if you want to check it out. That episode went so well that I asked her to introduce me to other folks that used to work at Victory, and this led to me being connected with Paul Friemel, who worked there for a few years, and I wanted to get his take on the behind the scenes because Monika said he would have some cool stories. Fun fact, if you're from Iowa, you might have heard of his band Second Best, which he was in before going to work at Victory, which we talk about briefly. He didn't mention the band name, so I figured I'd mention it now in the intro. But yeah, so I got him on the Skype, and this is what we chat about. Applying to work at Victory, meeting Double J, the Spitalfield mess up, Hawthorne Heights, Santa Mosh, Victor V, Pants Off Dance Off, the Ramsey Manifesto, Thursday, and a ton more. Check out his friend's company, Cybertron.com, where Paul participates on the podcast that they have. It's Seibertron.com. There's also a link in the show notes if you want to just click that and go there. Lastly, if you need an explainer video, which I mention a lot in these podcasts just to kind of keep it top of mind, I do that. My company's called Drive80.com, DRIVE80.com. I do explainer videos, whiteboard animations, and logo animations. So if your company is in need of explaining what it does in 60 to 90 seconds, I am a fucking pro at that. You can email me at mike@drive80.com to ask me any questions. Lastly, if you want to help support the podcast, you can also sign up on the Patreon, which I mentioned earlier. Patreon.com/thiswasthescene. It's $1 a month, which is about 2.5 Starbucks coffees a year you'd be giving up to listen to this wonderful archive of punk rock history. That's all I got to say, so feel free to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with anyone who would love some punk rock nostalgia. With that said, let's get started. I don't know if you got a chance to hear any episodes, but it's just really kind of like an archive of the late 90s punk scene.
Yeah, I've listened to a couple of them. Like the Jason Tate interview was especially interesting.
Oh, cool. Was something that stood out to you about that one? Or?
Oh, just I'd never heard the guy speak. He was like sort of an icon of the moment. You know, it was just a name, an internet name.
Yeah, it's weird talking to people sometimes because you don't expect it. Like I talked to Sean from Coalesce, and I was like, you know what? I was not expecting your voice to sound like that. But the typical structure of this, it's usually talking to people who have owned a label, they were in the band, they're a record producer, they were. In this, I did an interview with Monika Ebly, and she talked about Victory Records because I've tried to reach out to Tony in some aspects, but I don't think he'd ever want to come on anyway.
No, you'll never get him to break into this.
I figure there's so much surrounding this label in, I wouldn't say the most positive aspect, but I don't want to like sit here and trash talk them. I just want to just hear stories about what happened, and that, you know, they could be positive, negative, whatever. And Monika gave me some other names of people that work there, and she said I should talk to you, so I reached out, and here we are, gonna rap about this.
Yeah, and you also talked to Jason, which is great. I listened to that one. That was good.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about Double J.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't really talk about his Victory time, so he's been around the block a lot more.
So I figure with this, I could just kind of jump 1-2 into the label. So how you got involved in the punk scene, and then how did that lead into Victory Records? And then from there, we can kind of just discuss your time there and, a little behind the scenes and see where this goes.
Well, I will start at the beginning, which is kind of far back there, but I'll keep it brief about myself. My name is Paul Friemel. I was a graphic designer in the most basic terms at Victory Records for almost 3 years. I mean, I did way more than just that, but that was my title. I would probably consider these days, I would have said I was a art director or senior art director, or maybe even creative director at that point. But just those sort of titles didn't exist at Victory. Plus, I was too young to know or care.
How old were you when you worked there, actually, real quick?
I had graduated college in the year 2000, and I moved to Chicago almost immediately after I graduated and got the job. But I want to go back before that a little bit.
Sure.
I was into music for a while and always into art stuff, and I was known as kind of one of the arty kids at my high school in Iowa. That's where I grew up, the Quad Cities. If anyone listening has been there, probably not. I was in a few bands back then. As I went into college, I was in a band we were, I don't know, getting some sort of traction. We had recorded a CD, like that was like a big deal back in the 2000s or something like that. You didn't have a lot of music streaming. MP3.com was sort of the first one that kind of came out around then. So I stuck with it and booked a lot of the shows for my band. We got a chance to open for Eve 6 at this club in Clinton called the Pig Pen, which was, even getting the show was crazy. But then we got it and like played to an oversold crowd for the first time, like a real crowd. The place was packed to the gills. It was like intoxicating. From that moment on, I was like, this is what I want to do. This was so cool. And it probably never caught that high again, but we did a lot of good shows. Like we played the Warped Tour. We booked Fall Out Boy for $50, and they spent the night at my house, like before they, right when the first record came out. I wanted to be in a band and like make it and, get signed and all that, but it's really hard. Didn't even realize how like little of a fish in such a little pond we really were. Like we had no advocates, no industry real knowledge. We charted on CMJ for like a week once, and we thought that was a big deal. But we did some pretty cool things and opened for some big bands, but ultimately it fizzled out. But I still had, made the website and did all the flyers, and like we made shirts and did the packaging for the CDs. So like a lot of people in graphic design majors back then, maybe not all of them, but I felt like the majority of them were like, I want to design CD covers, man. That's what I want to do. And that was definitely where I was leaning. And then a friend of mine had an internship at Victory over the summer. And I didn't really, I was so clueless. I wasn't even like really understanding what labels bands were on. And like, it's, just kind of not, my head wasn't in the game really big. But my friend was working at Victory and he's like, I bet you could work there. And I was like, no way. And he's like, yeah, I think you totally could. And he had interned there during the Thursday, let's call it, debacle. And so he kind of told me some of those stories, and he told me these names of people like Tony. And I was like, I don't know what any of that means, but I was certainly sure to find out, because I sent in my resume when I was graduating to Victory. Didn't hear anything for a week. I was like, oh, I guess that's not going to work. And he's like, why don't you just send it again? I was like, send it again? Okay. And it was like a fax machine. And knowing, what I know now is like that fax machine was going straight to Tony. Like it's in Tony's office. I sent it in the second time. I felt pretty stupid, but I did. And I got like an email immediately, like this, like minutes later. And I don't know if it's because he saw it twice and was like, oh, this guy, he's not giving up, like maybe I should take a second look at this or what, but whatever. The timing might've just been right, but I had a call and an interview and, all that stuff. And within a week of sending in that second resume, I didn't have a job offer right away. I had to do some homework. I had to make like a flash e-card, if you remember what those were. So I had to make a flash e-card, and it was for Atreyu for their second album, the one with I'm more of a visual person, like the vampire chick on the cover with the cool logo. I always thought that logo was great. It was ultimately just a font, but I thought it looked cool. So yeah, I did that e-card, and I had the job offer, and I think it was like pitifully low, but I thought it was good. And I moved to Chicago. Funny story, I slept in my car the night before, the Sunday before my first day, because I couldn't get into my apartment for some reason, and went to work at my first job out of college, like with no sleep.
Wait, was this during the winter or the summer?
It was the summer, like July of 2004.
Ugh. What was the call like when he called you? Was he? I don't know what his I don't know what his voice sounds like. I just know things he's done from stories. I don't know if he sounds like he's aggressive. Does he sound like? Is he kind of? What's his persona? Like, what was that call like?
Well, I don't think I had a call with him before I met him. I went in for the interview, showed him my stuff and whatever, and he was interested in hiring me. He said he'd send me an offer like later. So we had a call. I was back in Ames, Iowa, and I had a call in like the college design center with him where we just kind of, it was a really flimsy negotiation for my salary, but I'd already met him. He's just, I'd say intense. Everything that comes out of his mouth has like, I wouldn't say gravitas, but like he's expecting you to like think it was the greatest thing you've ever heard or that it's really important. He's just really passionate about his business. You know, it comes across in everything he does. That manifests in a variety of ways, some good, some bad. He's unique, I would say.
When you did that thing for Atreyu, did you see it get utilized on the internet, or was that just a behind the scenes thing?
You know, I never. Good question, because I've always kind of wondered, like, did they actually like send that out? Like, I don't know. They might have. It just had like animations and stuff, and it was like a really bad flash animated asset flying around keyframe music video to one of the songs.
What year was this?
2004.
Okay, yeah, actually, that's exactly when I started getting into Flash, so I totally remember that. I loved that shit.
It was pretty fun. I'm glad it's gone. I don't miss it.
Yeah, I'm in After Effects now. It's like way smoother. What was your like specialty? How many years were you designing prior to getting the gig?
I was making stuff in Paint, back
Oh, wow.
when I first got my first computer, when I was like 9 or 10 or something, but I wouldn't call that graphic design. I went to a 4-year state school, Iowa State Cyclones, woo, and got in the College of Design there. And that was basically a 3-year program because the first year you have to apply to get in. 200 people apply and only like 90 get in. So at least you have to have some sort of visual chops to get through the gauntlet. About 3 years, slightly professionally, but I learned on my own at college how to make a DVD because I wanted to make a DVD for my band, with like the bad live recordings and stuff that we had done. And so I learned Final Cut Pro. And that's what I used to make all the videos. I had never been trained in video editing. I kind of just used my best guess on like where you should make cuts and like, volumes and just all sorts of flyby. It was very DIY, you could say. I even our school did not have Final Cut Pro or DVD Studio Pro on the computer. So I had to bring it on a hard drive and install it every time I wanted to use it because I didn't have a Mac of my own. And so, and then every night, they would wipe any new stuff that was on the computer. So I had to go spend 30 minutes installing that program. But in the end, I came out with a DVD. And that's one of the things I showed Tony in the interview. And I think like, his eyes probably lit up really big. Like, oh my God, I don't know how to even find someone that knows how to do this stuff. Let's get these chops in our design department.
What'd you like bring to the table at the place? We just kind of doing everything? Or were you like Double J, he's a designer, and then some people are good with layout, and so they can just put together the CDs and the flyers and shit like that. Like, did you just do it all basically?
It was everything, yeah. I mean, we had a screen printing department in Victory, which was unique and cool. I already knew how to separate things to, simple color separations for shirts, but not like halftones and stuff with underbases and whatnot. So I like knew enough to be given a project and like figure it out and then get pretty good at it. Double J was the first person I met. Like I sat down next to him, I was like, "Hey, I'm Paul." And it turned out we're both like from the Midwest and we got along pretty good, pretty quick. We were doing layouts in Cork when I started there, and I was like, "Why are we using this shit?" Like, he's like, "Well, that's what the print shop needs." I'm like, "Are you sure?" So I'd like call him up. I called up the printer and I was like, "Can we use InDesign?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, sure." And I was like, well, here we go. And I never did Cork again. But the first layout I ever did, and this was kind of like, this like blew my mind when I got there. The first like little task I was given was to make a 7-inch for Taking Back Sunday's new single.
Oh shit, which album or which single was it?
It's the whatever the lead single off the second album was. And I'm sorry, it's been 20 years. So
I think I was just listening to it.
it was the one with the baby like reaching.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of what the song was. Decade Under the Influence was the first single. I remember
That's
that.
it. That's it.
That was the one.
Yeah. And like, at this point I'm like, whoa, Taking Back Sunday is a big band. Like this is important. Like I don't first off don't want to mess this up. And number two, like I didn't create new assets for this. I was just using the graphics we kind of already had, which made it a little more comfortable. It's like, okay, I don't have to get creative with this and I don't want to, because it's almost like, why should I be putting my mark on this like already really good art? So that was, it's basically just moving text around and making it fit for the vinyl, and making you had to make a sticker to go on the record, which was cool. That was where you got to kind of be a little bit creative. Like I should probably preface it with like, no one was telling us like what the rules were. Like I would ask Double J, like, is this cool? And he would kind of give me guidance, but it's sort of, it was very fly by the seat of your pants. Working in the art department of Victory was awesome because you kind of got to you had so much autonomy. You could do whatever you wanted unless like there were mandates like coming down. Like some bands would supply art and you would just, you weren't supposed to mess with it. You were just supposed to put it together and like put the lyrics over it. Or sometimes you were given like, you know who Darkest Hour is?
It sounds familiar.
Black metal band or something. They're an awesome band. And we had, I'm jumping way ahead now, but like there was a time, this is just so weird. In an envelope, I was sent physical like cutouts and pieces of artwork that made no sense as like a music layout, but they're like, make some, this is the artwork for the album. So like I had to be the artist and create this whole layout for them based on the assets they gave. And that was the album was Undoing Ruin, and it has like this, called him like the dead boy or the zombie boy, and like I put these dragonfly wings behind him. I mean, I'm not saying this was like high art, but it was like no one was telling me not to do this. And then send it to the band. They're like, awesome, let it rip.
Which album was this?
Undoing Ruin.
Of course, it would be called that. Let me see this. Oh, there we go. Yeah, I'm googling this just to see what this looks like. Undoing. Oh, okay, that's pretty cool.
That was just an example of like the background. All I was given was a physical cutout of that boy with all the drawings on him and stuff, and like there was like paint on him and stuff. The whole background, everything was like not part of it. You had to kind of get resourceful with what you had, and those were kind of the most fun projects. You get each album was like its own project, and some of them you did a lot more stuff than others, but it all started with that album artwork or photography, and then you put it together to make a whole somewhat campaign, for the whole album.
When you started, like the first couple months there, did you like fuck anything up, like in the design or in the files, or did you guys like have like 1,000 things printed and you had a typo or anything like that?
I mean, I can tell you my biggest claim to infamy there. Like, I'm surprised I didn't get fired, but I mean, the first album that I did the whole thing from scratch was Spitalfield, Stop Doing Bad Things. So I was like, oh, this is my chance. This is great. And Double J had done the first album's artwork. So then it was weird with Double J. It's like, other than Bayside, once he did the first album, he let me do the second album. It was like he didn't want to revisit it or something. I'm not saying that ever came out of his mouth, but that's just like, that was how it always happened. So he did the first Spitalfield album. They were doing a second one, and I was the new guy. And I met Mark Rose, the singer, and like we talked about his ideas, and I tried to bring it to life. And I worked way too hard on that, and it turned out not. I would say it's just kind of ugly ultimately. Like the album, it's just not really the vibe I maybe think it should have been. But that's just the artwork. The artwork was fine, but I was also the one kind of creating the masters, because at the time, when I say the master, I mean like the disc we would use to make the replication, because we would sometimes, and the reason I had to do that, and they weren't just using the one from the studio, was because, which they usually would use, we started doing those, like, remember enhanced CDs?
I think was that kind of like the Victory Comp Incompatible, where it was a CD with videos on it and shit?
Yeah, so like you could put it in your, most computers don't even have CD-ROMs anymore, but you could put a disc into your computer, and like instead of just playing the music, it would show up as like a file directory, and you could launch a director file or a flash file, or some application that will give you some sort of heightened experience with the album. Usually it's purely promotional, like it just has the music videos on it, or it could have special links to web pages, or the lyrics or anything like that. But we would do those, and it always really complicated things, as you can imagine, because there's like a technical prowess you have to make that work. So for Spitalfield, we did that. And so what I would have to do is like burn the CD with the computer files on it, so that when you put it into the computer, it would play. It would play like basically that enhanced CD content would be available when you put it into your computer. Now, I had been making, at this point, I had been doing a lot of video work and like audio. We were putting music over videos and stuff and making commercials. So like we would usually rip the AIFs from the CD and then put them in we were always using iTunes at the time. But then it was the flash file, like either the eCard or this enhanced CD. You had to like downsample one of the AIFs to a low rate MP3 so you could stream it or put it on the web. So when you do that, so let's say there's 12 tracks, I make the MP3 version of that AIF file, and now there's an extra track. It's like that song is now duplicated and there's 13 tracks in there. I mistakenly burnt the music with that track list, and so there was an MP3 quality version of a song and an AIF one, and we added an extra track. So when you play Stop Doing Bad Things, the single Gold Dust versus State plays twice in a row. Like you play it one time, it's track 3, and then it doesn't go to track 4. Well, track 4 is the same song again. And that went to the master because no one listened to it after we had made cooked the master that would have the enhanced CD stuff on it. And the CD came out as my first thing. I'm so excited, and I get like the actual print copy, and I put it in my computer, and we're listening to it. And I were like, "Hey, did we just listen to this song?" And I swear, like as I'm listening to it for the second time, here comes our production manager, whose name is his name is Clint. He's a really awesome guy, and like he had a look on his face. He's like, "Paul," I'm like, "Uh-oh, this isn't good." I actually didn't get in a ton. Clint and I had discussions about how to not let this happen again, and like let's institute some sort of check. And so at that point, before we put out a master, someone was designated as the listener to make sure that there weren't any issues, which is a good practice. That's smart if you're running a business that mass produces musical material.
Oh my God.
And it's just awful, because I actually was watching Mark Rose do like a live stream a year or two ago where he played the album acoustic, and he kind of told the story of that mess up from his side, and how like I didn't even think about this, like how it messed up like Touch Tunes jukeboxes forever. Like you don't know the whole track listing is messed up.
Wait, that thing that you did that?
Yeah, because there's 14 tracks on the record, but they're all like labeled. Like if there's 12 or 13 tracks, there's actually one extra, and it's in the middle. It's the third and fourth song are duplicated. So now like the actual fourth song is the fifth track, and so on.
Okay.
Through the whole record. It just was awful. And Clint made me tell the band. I had to be the one to tell. And I remember it was at the Metro, the back of the Metro, and I was like, "Hey, Mark, made a mistake on your record." And I could tell he was not stoked, but I'm like, "It's done. Like we can't fix it."
How many did you print?
I have no idea. Like the runs of records, I have. That's not something. I mean, I probably could have asked, but like that's not something that was publicly available or even privately available in the office.
Did they fix it, like the second pressing?
I don't know if it ever. I mean, as far as I know, they all have the issue. If there's ever been any reissues since, it's like a question of if they're going to fix it or not. I don't know. I would hope so. Anyone out there, if you've ever had to listen to that, yeah, that was me, and I apologize profusely.
Oh my God, that's crazy. That's got to be so nerve-wracking. When so like when you first couple months working there, what was that like? Was it positive? Did you kind of start thinking, this is a little interesting?
When I first started there, I mean, it was first off, it was like kind of a dream come true. I was like, thank God we didn't have Twitter and stuff back then, because I probably would have made like Victory Paul and like been someone that I would have tried to like milk it, but I tried to stay pretty behind the scenes. It was really cool. We got brand new computers when I started, at the time, awesome Power Macs, there wasn't a ton of work at the beginning. There wasn't a ton of stuff for me to do. I was not swamped. I was just like, are there projects for me to do? And I was just trying to learn the ropes. And I learned pretty quick that there's a lot more to working at Victory than just doing your job. There was a lot you had to kind of tiptoe around. And a lot of this, is probably because of, Tony's, what do you call it, explosive attitude at times. You didn't know what could set him off. But I remember one of the first things that two things that I recall from that early time is the radio guy, Mike Jacobow, who, if you can talk to, would probably be awesome. He's still in the industry. I started right before Where You Want to Be came out. And so it was talking about like Billboard charts and stuff like that. I didn't really pay attention to much of that except for like what I had heard on MTV at the time. But like Mike went around and he's like, hey, how many records do you think we're going to sell of Where You Want to Be next week? Because it's, the numbers are going to come in and we're all like, I don't know, 20,000, 60,000, something like that. We're just basically trying to do an office pool. And I guess, it's just something fun. Tony found out about that and since he uses email as a weapon.
Yeah, that's what Monika was saying. He like gets ape shit with it.
Yeah. So suddenly there was this email, to everybody. And it was like, don't get distracted by stuff like this. Keep your heads down and make sure we sell records, something like that. I'm definitely paraphrasing, not quoting anyone in this whole interview. And I was like, whoa, what? That seems strange. Like we should all be celebrating this. This seems like a good thing, right? But I was like, yeah, we should work hard, so I just kept my head down. And then I didn't have a Victory email address my first week for whatever reason, IT stuff. Or maybe they were just not sure if they wanted to keep me, who knows? But I was doing some work for Action, which is a band post-reunion show. It's like members of the reunion show. And they had some kind of crazy artwork and like I had nothing to do. So Double J was like, why don't you make some merch designs for this album, this Action album? And so I was like, okay. So I made a bunch of them and I was like, well, I should probably send them to the band, right? So I did, but I didn't have a Victory email. So I'm sending them from my college email that was still in service. Double J got a call from Tony that was like I couldn't hear it, but I could tell it wasn't good, And after he hung up the phone, he's like, yeah, maybe don't send any emails from your college email address to any of the bands anymore. I'm like, okay, well, I mean, give me an email then. But like that caused a problem because like there was another designer that was off site working from home, and I guess like the band reached out to him and was like, who is Paul? And is this a real person? Like, what is this? And why do they have our artwork? And so then that person ended up getting let go at some point. And I think I was maybe his replacement.
The designer?
Yeah. The inter-office politics stuff that is actually ancient history.
Well, did you see a lot of people within the first, like, let's say 6 months coming and going really fast or?
First 6 months? No. I mean, maybe some people came and went, but nothing super bad. But like there was definitely a period that I recall maybe 2 years in where like for 6 months, every week someone was either hired or fired. So like it was just I swear to God, every week for one reason or another. And that was crazy. And that's when I started to realize like, this is pretty bizarre. I guess I'll just say it was a toxic work environment for sure. But that doesn't mean it was like awful. It definitely was a great job for me, I would say. I owe a lot to Tony and being at Victory. So I'm just giving you what I think is the somewhat impartial truth to the whole thing. I have respect for Tony Brummel. That is for sure.
Well, when you hear like just different podcasts, I know that there's other podcasts out there that they've talked to, let's say, all the bands on there, or some of the bands on there, and I've talked to a few and they kind of tiptoe around it a little bit, but back then, the word on the street is that like it was a shit place to work or whatever, and has a negative connotation. So like when you hear that, do you kind of get a little like, it's not really like that. It wasn't really like that.
No, because I understand where they're coming from. I was in the design department, and there was a physical layout to Victory's office, and we were as far away from Tony as possible. We were in the far other corner. We were somewhat sheltered from a lot of, from what I've heard from, other war stories from other ex-employees. There was a lot of stuff that happened over there that like we just never had to deal with. A lot of like yelling and like slamming doors and loud things that distract you, that make you wonder what the hell's going on. We just sort of had it. We had it the best, I would say. And maybe the screen printing team had it pretty good too, because they were also very separated. I understand where they're coming from, and I don't think they're wrong for feeling that way. Just my experience was different.
I think like when I was in high school, I had a history teacher that people were like, "Oh, Mr. Rutch, he's such an asshole, and he's like just really difficult and hard." And when I got to the class, I was like, "He's like one of my favorite teachers, just because he was just so direct." And that's kind of like what they said. Like Steve Jobs was like, he was just like, "I don't. This is my fucking vision. I'm gonna make you better, but it's for the product, and things like that." Do you think that's the kind of style that Tony had, or was he more just emotionally off a little bit?
Emo- the latter, I would say.
Yeah.
He knew what he wanted, and he couldn't always get it. And when he didn't get what he wanted, it would upset him.
That sounds like Steve Jobs. Did you ever read this Steve Jobs book at all?
No. I mean, I wouldn't compare the two personally.
I mean, it's a stretch. I read the book. I mean, he was just he was emotional. He would start crying when they'd be like, "We can't do this." Like he was like really off fucking.
Yeah, but did he threaten people's like lives and safety on a regular basis?
No,
Because I don't know.
I think that's a bit of a difference there.
Yeah, I mean, there's, I say I have respect for Tony, but like, there's definitely things I did not enjoy about working for him. Doesn't mean he's like the devil or anything. He's a guy that, like I said, he got what he wanted, and he knew how to get it most of the time. And he was very good. He understood timing as far as like when to release something or when to do something, or when we have to get a message out and how to do it. Like he was just, I don't know if it was dumb luck, but he just like hit home runs with some of that stuff all the time.
Oh yeah. I mean, it was pretty obvious the bands that were coming out, even like when they started changing gears, going from hardcore to like Take It Back Sunday, and then Hawthorne Heights, and then that shit blowing up. It's like he really figured like he had his like finger on the pulse of what the next step was going to be.
Yeah, he had a good ear and like a knack for picking the right stuff. I mean, like when I started there, Hawthorne Heights had just come out, and I didn't even know who they were. The stories I've heard from the band and everything is like, I think they might have done a showcase or something, because that's what we would do sometimes for like A&R purposes. We would like rent a room and have bands come and play, and you'd think we'd all get in a round table and discuss it, but no, it's basically just like if Tony decided it was good, it was what would fly. But it was still kind of fun to do those things. No one liked Hawthorne Heights, is what I heard. Like everyone's like, like, nah, let's not sign them. But Tony did. And then it was like the biggest, after Taking Back Sunday, they were the next huge band. He would often send emails like, people need to be working harder. Hawthorne Heights is keeping the lights on over here, because they were selling like, I don't know, 4,000 or 5,000 records a week.
Yeah.
Like repeatedly. It was crazy.
I never understood why that band was so big. I was just like, I just don't fucking get it, man. Take It Back Sunday, 100%.
Hey man, they hit on something, like they do what they do very well.
Yeah.
And it resonated. And I saw it like at Bamboozle and stuff. I would watch them actually play, and everyone's going, bobbing along and moshing. And it was, they were kind of a phenomenal, or maybe just a phenomenon at the time. It was wild.
Real quick, if you're looking for an explainer video or someone to do motion graphics for your company, check out my company, drive80.com, and you can email me at mike@drive80.com for more info. That's all I got to say. So now back to the interview. What department took like the brunt from him?
Sales.
Sales. That makes sense.
Sales and press, or publicity, I guess we'd call it. There was an accounting team as well. I don't know how they were treated, but probably pretty well. They were dealing with all the money,
So Monika said that in her interview, she kind of brushes over it, but there was some guy that worked there, and she's like, yeah, like he could do no wrong, or whatever. She's like, well, mostly like the guys could do no wrong. Was that like a really big thing in the office where he was just really coming down on women more, or was it across the board?
I couldn't really speak to that. I know that there were some questionable moments in the office that probably, as a guy, like especially when I in my 20s, like totally went over my head at the time, but I couldn't really give a say on that. But I could tell you that there were some other employees that a lot of the ladies didn't love, and they would tell, they would complain about it like afterwards and stuff. But
well, I mean, I wasn't talking more about like anything rude or stuff. It's more of just the yelling business wise, where he'd give less leeway to the women in the room than like the guys. Is like, okay, we can kind of get away with it.
I couldn't really speak to that. I don't really know.
So you said you were there for 3 years. So when Monika says you want to come on this and talk about it, and it's like, oh, you guys have all these stories. I'm always interested. All right, like what are the stories? Like what is the thing that's going on behind the scenes that are interesting?
Well, I mean, there's stories about how stuff got created. There were definitely some weird parties that happened at the office after hours, especially when I started. Like I met Silverstein, and I think it was Hawthorne Heights. We're all at we basically went back to the office and had a party till like 3 a.m. I left at like 2, but I just remember people were bonging beers through posters like in the office. It was really fun. Like those are great memories. But like one of the weirder things that I was involved with at Victory was something called Santa Mosh. Have you heard of that?
No.
It was like my first. It was a viral video thing that we came up with. We had an employee that was sort of technically minded in our design department and said like, "Hey, do you guys know what a Google bomb is?" And we're like, "No." He's like, "It's a word that like no one searches for. So if you can make it, you can get the top listing on this." So he's like, "The word Santa Mosh doesn't really exist." And we're like, "Oh, okay. Well, what do we do with that information?" So what I did is I made a music video of this hardcore guy in Chicago dressed in a Santa suit all over the city of Chicago, moshing in the Christmas Village and like on the train down by the Bean in Chicago, like all these like very recognizable Chicago places. And then we put this song from Bury Your Dead over it, and it just blew up. It was crazy. And I think what really did it, though, this is back when MySpace was big. We made a Santa Mosh account and just made an animated GIF from the video of Santa moshing. I did it at the end of the day, made the account, came back the next day. We had 10,000 friend requests. And back then you had to manually approve them all. Like our interns were approving MySpace requests for the bands because they had all the bands had thousands of MySpace requests, and they weren't going to do it. So
I'm watching this video right now on YouTube, and it's fucking hilarious. Like I could see where even now I feel like this thing would go viral.
Well, they've tried. I know since I left, like the actual source video has been lost to time. It's somewhere in the Victory. Well, the hard drives are all probably deleted at this point, but I don't even have like the full res video. But even back then, it wasn't HD. It was like 420 by 480 by 320 or something. It was DV, whatever DV was. They tried to replicate the Santa Mosh success many times, but there's still nothing as good as the first video.
I mean, this one got released 12 years ago. It's got 91,000 views on it. There's a couple of them.
Well, it was before. I mean, it was before YouTube. The web infrastructure that's up there now just like wasn't there at the time, so it was just a different kind of animal.
Like, what are some cool things that you guys did like that, where some other creative stuff that you were like, oh, let's try this, and you was like, oh shit, this worked really well.
Well, nothing ever worked as good as the Santa Mosh thing. God, we did so many e-cards, I always felt like they were such a waste of time, because it's not like we were really tracking how much they're used or like how they're sent around. Man, we did. Oh, so there was something called Victor. Okay, there's two big projects I can remember. There was Victor V and Victor Me, and Victor V was like Victory TV. Okay, so that was Tony and one of the radio guys came up with this idea, and what it was essentially an infomercial that we were going to run on Fuse, like every morning. It was an hour or a 30-minute time slot. I don't know, but it was the biggest amount of like video editing I had to do in a compressed amount of time ever. It was the hardest thing I did at Victory, was doing that Victor V show. And it was basically just music. It was basically just music videos with a streamer at the bottom, like with news. It was really pretty bad. But there's someone on YouTube that did sort of a retrospective, like a young kid that grew up and was doing videos on YouTube. And he did like a deep dive on Victor V, which is pretty amazing for me to watch, because it's like this person actually watched this show that we created. And we actually had this guy, Mark Bubb, ended up hapless victim, became the host of the show. And we basically treated it like it was 120 minutes or something, but it was all Victory bands and all commercials for Victory Records and all commercials for Victory merch. It was just like relentless. And I never knew if anyone watched it. I mean, it was on at like 6 a.m. because it was on before the programming started. It was paid. We were basically doing paid programming to look like it was on Fuse.
I feel like I remember this, actually.
You know what an advertorial is?
No.
it's like an ad in a magazine that looks like it's an editorial or it's an article. And so like you could buy a 2-page spread and you could like have an interview with the band, and you can make it look like it's just part of the magazine, but it's really an ad.
That's smart.
It was kind of the same concept, and we did some of those too, but it was the same concept as that, but in a video format. There were some episodes that were pretty fun, like we'd interview bands and stuff, but like I was not good at like just creating video content because I did it all myself growing up. It was all DIY, and I didn't ever like take classes or no one taught me how to do this stuff. So I never lit anything very well, or I always handheld the camera or put it on a tripod, and it just wasn't ever, looking back on it, it's pretty bad. Like it wasn't good enough for what we were doing. Once or twice the band's like, hey, can we not put that video up? It doesn't look very good. And I'm like, oh yeah, sure. Sorry. It was what it was, but it wasn't great.
I think I just found the record that you designed. Is it for Take Back Sunday, Decade of Influence? Is it like some kid in a devil's costume on a train track?
No, I didn't design that. It was basically just like the major the album cover, the baby looking down the street, but like reformatted for a 7-inch. Like I didn't design anything creative on that.
Were you working there the same time as Monika?
Yeah, when I talked to Monika about this, I always forget. Like I always feel like she was there the whole time I was there, but it's all a blur. She was there like only for like the last few months that I worked there.
Oh, okay. So she was like on her way out.
No, she just started.
Oh, she just started. Okay.
Yeah, like I'd been there before, but it made a lot of lifelong friends at Victory. That is for sure. Like we were all in the brig, together, and we would party hard. There was a bar that opened down the street after like a few months, and that was just where we went all the time. During lunch, after work, it was crazy. It was right by the train, so it was easy to get to. But
what was with like, were you there for the soda machine thing where you had to like take it out of the office because like silverware was missing or something like that?
Oh yeah, the silverware. So it's the spoon story. Like I don't know the details and all that, but it was basically Tony was having a fit about something. Like there was a kitchen, and there was like, plates and stuff and a dishwasher, but like no one would ever pick up after themselves, or everything was dirty, or they wouldn't bring back the silverware. And Tony went back there to have lunch and like needed a spoon or something, and sent one of those, notorious emails like, where's the spoon? Like, no one has any spoons. Am I the only one that cleans up around here? To the whole staff. And we're all like, what? And then I think one of the employees like played a gag where they like, either they were emailing around a picture of a spoon, or they put it on his desk when he didn't notice or something, and like, it was like a little gag, but he did not appreciate it at all. And also, Tony could read and did read everyone's emails. He had the keys. He had the keys to the castle for sure.
Did you ever send anything that you were like, fuck, he's going to read this?
I don't think so. Like, I think he liked me to an extent. He just, he could get a lot out of me. So he liked that. I didn't really rock the boat a lot. Although there was one time he had an idea that I really wasn't into. Do you remember Pants Off, Dance Off on Fuse?
Yes.
So we had Fuse or MTV running on all the TVs all the time in the office. So we could see like our band's music videos and stuff. Of course, you'd see other bands. You'd see like who was also like My Chemical Romance was getting played all the time. We would see all the ads for Pants Off, Dance Off. And it seemed like it was I guess Tony thought it was a popular show, and he wanted me to record. He wanted us to do that, like for Victor V, or for something. And he's like, look, we're gonna call it Strip Down, Tear Down. I'm like, okay. And remember, the people actually got naked. Like they blur them out and stuff. But like, if you're filming that shit, like it's happening. And he wanted to get some, like, if I remember correctly, and again, I'm putting some words in people's mouths. So if I remember the idea correctly, it was purely like, we're gonna make our own version of Pants Off, Dance Off with like hardcore music. And we're going to hire strippers, and they're going to come in on the weekend, and we're going to film them do this thing. And I was kind of like, I don't want to do that. That doesn't sound fun to me. That sounds creepy and like gross. And so I didn't say that to Tony directly, but I told some other people, and I think the word got back that I wasn't really willing to play ball with that. And so it got canceled. And I was like, maybe I do have some power here. I don't know.
I feel like 25-year-old me would have been like, fuck yeah, dude.
Yeah, it had red flags on it for me. Like I'm nothing against strippers or like, getting naked. Just I didn't want to mix my work life with that at that point. I did have a live-in girlfriend at the time. Not that that really would have mattered, but I'll just tell you, it's even now I'd be like uncomfortable doing that.
Oh, I wouldn't do that shit now. I'd be like, no fucking way. There's no way. What I mean, it sounds like you liked working there. Like, it sounds like it's interesting getting all these different perspectives because if people think that it was, a crap label or whatever, but then people working there are like, it really wasn't that bad. It sounds like you had more of a positive experience.
I definitely had a positive experience. I don't want to say it wasn't that bad though. Like it's been 20 years almost. They're less and less, but I still have stress streams where I'm working in the office, but I'm like not supposed to be there, but I still need to work. So I'm like hiding under my desk, typing on my computer above me so Tony won't see me when he walks by and be like, "What are you doing here?" Like that's an illogical fantasy. That makes no sense, but that's the PTSD that I'm still stricken with from working there.
Well, that's just because you were young and had these strict, tight deadlines to get artwork out, and that was it, or was it just like the top coming down on you, where you're like, I don't want to get yelled at again today?
A little bit of that. There were some, the deadline stress was pretty intense too. Like you had, 3 days to make a record layout to hit the release date, stuff like that. But it was more just like, it's not hard to be scared of Tony. Okay. Like, he can be ferocious. Just in the, like, even just the regular things he says, or when he gets really riled up, but like, he can also be really protective of you. Like, you know what I mean? Like he can kind of have your back at times as well. So, he's fierce in a lot of ways, not all of them bad.
What was that manifesto thing that got published? Who did he work with you?
Oh, that was Ramsey.
Yeah, what was that whole thing?
Was that what? That was a sales director that worked there. I think he's still in Chicago. He's an interesting dude. I think he worked at TVT before he came to Victory. So he was like the head of sales at the time, and he was really good at getting our records into big box stores. So, or like we would get big displays of all our catalog at Best Buy, and I think that was because of Ramsey's relationships. But I think when the relationship soured with Victory and he had to be let go, he like wrote, I think he was trying to write a book about the experience.
Yeah, I have it open right now actually on some website.
And I read it once a long time ago, and it is interesting, like just the way his take on like what Victory was, like how it was basically like Tony had tapped into a market of the emo kid, which had disposable income, and it's like the way he spells it out, I was like, that some of that makes a lot of sense. It's not like a secret. It's just like his take on it was pretty good. I don't know if all the details in that are spot on. I read it when it came out. Like I don't remember it or care much anymore.
This came out when you were working there or afterwards?
I think it was after I was done, because I left in 2007, and I left of my own accord. I decided to leave. It just kind of became too much for me. The stuff that I didn't like about Victory was becoming more prevalent, and like the cool stuff wasn't as good. And like the band, like Hawthorne Heights had sued the label, like that whole thing was going on. I'd already seen Taking Back Sunday's departure, which was really sloppy, but they got out of there, and like you don't want those big bands that you like to not be where you are if they were. You know what I mean? It kind of just makes you feel weird. It's like, why are they gone and I'm still here? Then again, everyone that was working there got paid. So that's a big difference from being a band.
Did you ever were you friends with people in other labels?
No, I really was not. No.
Yeah, I was wondering if there was some communication where you're talking to someone from, I don't fucking know, Vagrant or something, or whoever was around, and you're like go-kart, and you're just like, hey, what's it like over there? Like, you guys having PTSD right now too? And they're like, no, it's actually pretty cool.
No, I mean, that would have been really enlightening at the time. It just never dawned on me to like reach out to any of those people. Or Tony didn't like it if you listened to anything other than Victory music in the office. I remember one time we were listening to Saves the Day. They have like an album with a weird cover that's like more sing-songy. It's not like much of a punk record, but Double J and I were listening to it, and Tony just walked back. He's like, "What's this crap?" And I'm like, it saves the day. He's like, why are you listening to this? It's like, because it's new and I've never heard it. And he's like, you don't listen to that. Listen to X, Y, or Z. I'm like, okay. So we just like stopped listening to non-Victory music just to avoid that whole confrontation, for the rest of the time. It just made life easier. And I've still, because like that interaction, I've still never really listened to that whole record all the way through.
Oh my God.
I never owned it.
I would have fucking hated listening just the same catalog over and over.
Well, it was a pretty extensive catalog, but it did get old. You know what? One of the ways around it was to listen to unsigned bands and act like it was like A&R.
Oh, that's smart.
And so one thing that was kind of cool at the time, there was no Spotify. There wasn't really, there was MP3.com was gone. You had Pure Volume, which was like a holdover at the time that you could listen to music. In the design department, we would share our iTunes catalogs and the rest of the staff could listen to it. So I would keep an A&R playlist and people would listen to it. They would actually ask me who these bands were. And I was like, oh my God, this is cool. And I tried to I had a few showcases. I tried to get a few bands signed, but luckily never worked out.
Like who?
One of them called the Envy Corps was a band that I got the whole, like some of the staff was listening to and asking me about it. And it's someone from my college town. So I reached out to them and I was like, hey, Luke, there's some interest at Victory for you guys. Would you guys want to do a showcase? And he's like, oh man, we just got signed to Atlantic or something like that. So some major label, and they had just played in Europe with the Killers. So I had just missed it with them, but I think they made out a lot better than if they had been at Victory.
I almost feel like if you got someone signed to Victory, just from all the lawsuits that I've heard of, they would kind of be mad at you, like, thanks for that, man. And you're like, oh, I don't think I want to invite any more people on this label.
Well, I guess. I never got a band signed and just wasn't in the cards for me, so I never had to deal with that. It was, there were always new bands coming in. There was always a new band getting signed. Sometimes you could tell why. It was like, oh, because that band did really well, or it's a carbon copy of X, Y, or Z that's on Fuse. But I don't want to name any because that would sound like I don't like those bands. But it was cool to meet all the musicians, coming through, and like they were very friendly with the staff. I don't think I regularly gave random people hugs or like people I hardly knew, but like as soon as a new band came into the office, they're like, hey, nice to meet you. And it's like your family, because they needed you on their side at all times. Anything they could do to like hopefully get their band in a better, get more work done for their band than another band. They needed to kind of play the game, and they definitely did. I tried not to be that way. I tried to be the same with everybody, but it was an interesting time.
So I'm gonna start wrapping this up soon, but what you said, the Thursday debacle, what did you mean by that earlier?
Well, I wasn't there for that, but the intern that helped get me hired, that suggested I work there, told me stories, and it was about how they left, they basically got signed to Island, I think, but they really couldn't do that because they had, I guess, it's all in the contracts, right? Which are not really, I don't know the details of the contract, but he told me like there were lots of yelling phone calls in Tony's office with people from Island and Thursday, and it was just like a huge blowout anger fest. Again, this is a third-hand story from 20 years ago. So
when I said earlier that he wouldn't come on the podcast, why do you think he would not want to come on and talk about this stuff? Yeah, I feel like if if there's words going around about, hey, you were giving people PTSD, or some people really didn't like working for you, or bands are suing you, like I feel like I'd want to come out and say, all right, here's my piece.
I don't know why he would, no offense, I just don't know why he'd give you the time. Like he doesn't need to talk about any of this stuff publicly. He's sold the company at this point and is long gone from this stuff. He did his thing and he's done with it, and he's living a different life now.
Yeah, that's true. With $40 million or whatever it was.
Yeah, I mean, I have no idea what he sold it for, but that's pretty substantial to build a business like that for 20 some years and then sell it like for a massive amount of money. Like that's the story not many people have.
Do you still keep up with like music nowadays the same way, or are you not into it?
You know what? I'm actually, I don't keep up with modern music very much. Like I see all these emo festivals and I'm like, oh, that's cute. I wish my band had been well known enough to play at some of that stuff, but I am kind of getting back together with some of my old bandmates, and we've been recording some stuff. So like it's very insular. The last new song I listened to was, oh my God, someone in Florida. I've wiped my hands of it pretty much. I mean, I went on to do some other things in the music industry after Victory, but that's a whole nother story.
Why did you leave after 3 years?
Well, like I said, I kind of had enough. You know, like I said, there was a period of time where like people were coming and going all the time, people that I respected and were friends with too, and they were just like gone. And anytime someone leaves an organization that you enjoy being around them and they're gone, you have to like ask yourself like, well, why are they gone and I'm still here? Those kind of things. I had more than doubled my salary. I was feeling pretty good, but I just knew it wasn't going to go anywhere. Like there's nowhere to move up at Victory. It was a very flat model. Like sure there were managers of certain things, but like I'm not going to become the manager of Double J. He's been there much longer than me and has way more acumen. Like I had a college degree. We worked together so good, him and I. It was like really kind of that part of Victory was awesome. So like without him, I would have had a lot more trouble. If you're listening, Jason, it was great, and I still keep in touch with him a little bit.
Yeah, I love bantering with him randomly on like Instagram, just messaging each other. He's a fucking super cool dude. Cool, man. All right, so I'm gonna wrap this up. Before I ask the last question, was there anything you want to plug? It could be about you, it could be about a friend or a cause, it could be about all of them.
You know what? I really don't. I don't have anything to. Oh, I guess you can see me on a Transformers podcast on Sabertron.com, which you're not gonna be able to spell that.
Yeah, I was wondering what that your icon was in Skype. I was like, oh, Transformers.
Oh yeah, that's just a graphic someone did for me. But yeah, there's Sabertron.com. If you're into Transformer stuff, you'll know what that is, and I'm on the podcast for that. I'll be recording one tonight.
What do you guys talk about?
Transforming robots.
Like, do you talk about like the TV series, or you talk about the toys?
It's heavily leaning towards the product, the toys.
Oh, that's dope. I used to love that shit when I was a kid, man.
Well, that's my day job now is selling them.
Really? Oh my god.
Yeah, cat's out of the bag.
Sabertron?
Oh boy, SEIBERTRON.com. It's not my website. It's a friend of mine's. I just participate on the podcast, which is like every other week.
Do you just not want people to know you're on it, or do you have like a fake name on it, or people know it's you?
Oh, I'm Mr. Starscream.
I love it. Wait, do you do the voice?
No.
Okay,
no.
I was gonna say that'd be a lot. Mr. Starscream. This is crazy. Yeah, dude, I used to fucking oh god, I loved that shit so much when I was a kid, and the toys. They were so fucking great. All right, man. Last question. What scene ethics do you hold on to this day?
Really, just be honest. Like don't be telling people one thing and then do something else. That's a lot of, I think, what bands did not like about Victory. They thought they were getting involved in one way, and when the reality came to, they were like, "What's going on? Like this doesn't work for us." But they're stuck there, Yeah, just honesty and hard work. Those have always been, I think, my MOs.